Hi, Lindsay.
Okay. Thank you for coming, Morag and Sam, and we'll let you go ahead with your presentation. And I think you're going to screen share. Lynn's going to let you screen share. Great.
Hello, yes,
everyone.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I'll share my screen in a moment. I'll just introduce myself first, I think, while you can see me and my colleague Sam. So I'm Morag Williamson, convener of Yes for EU, and Sam Page, who is here also. Hopefully you can see her. She is a vice convener of Yes for EU, and the two of us are going to deliver this presentation for you. So I'm going to attempt to share screen now, and through the presentation, it's not full of information. It's all basically questions on the issues to do with Indie Scotland in the EU. So, and there are plenty of questions, of course. So anyway, I think I'll just attempt to share screen now. Here goes. Okay, can you see that?
And indeed.
Okay, so there we go. So independent Scotland and Europe, and I realised straight away on the title slide I have forgotten to put our website address. Classic error. So it's very easy to find. It's just yesforeu.scot, and in fact it's on my low-tech poster behind me. Okay, yesforeu.scot. Yeah, we're quite easy to find. So just a little bit about us first of all. We're a grassroots group. We've been going since 2020, early 2020, because we formed in the aftermath of the 2019 December election, which was of course disastrous. And up to that point, we had actually been doing a lot of campaigning against Brexit and for the People's Vote, which was a UK-wide campaign at the time. But of course, that ultimately failed, and Brexit has taken place. So after that, we decided we would really have to focus on independence campaigning. Up to that point, I think a lot of people like me had thought, okay, we'll stop Brexit first, get that out of the way, and then we'll focus on indie campaigning. So anyway, well, you know what happened, and we have been campaigning since 2020. For independence and for EU membership for Scotland. We're very active out on the streets. We never stopped, actually, all the way through the COVID tightest restrictions. We were out on the streets, whether it was just one or two of us with a placard, talking to people. We didn't even give them anything. We didn't give them flyers or anything, you know, because of the risk of transmission and so on. But we carried on throughout every couple of weeks, or at least every month. So we've done a lot of that. And so we have members. We have partly because of our focus on the EU, we do have a lot of members who are EU citizens and actually New Scots in general, including English people, because an awful lot of English people have moved to Scotland, as you know, to be in a better country. So we're very aware of the terrible treatment that EU citizens are suffering in this country. And we've spoken to a lot of people that we come across in Edinburgh when we're out there. I think it's important to say before I actually start on the actual presentation proper, we are not experts. I don't know, Sharon, if you thought we were experts, but we're not. We're grassroots campaigners. We've adopted a clear position on independence and EU membership, which is informed by expert sources and obviously familiarity with the debate and so on. So we're going to do our best. So I think I'm going to pass over to Sam now to talk about, to actually start on our questions. Or is it me? No, I'm doing it.
I think it's you.
It's me. Right, okay, and the first one is the kind of noddy question. And we're starting from the point of Scotland being independent, okay? So once we're independent, should we join an international trading community? The very basic question. which was kind of overlooked, I think, with the Brexit debate, because you know, the Brexiters basically gave the impression that you didn't need to belong to anything, you want to go out on your own, and all that isolationist rubbish. So yeah, the answer to that question is yes. And we're now discovering the costs of destroying those trading relationships, which has been done through Brexit with the EU, and how difficult it is to get trading relationships with other countries. So being in trading relationships, as most of the rest of the world realizes, it will reduce your trading costs, it'll increase prosperity, and you know, provide frictionless trade, and so yes, the answer is yes. And so then the next question is, so should we join the EU? So I'm going to pass over to you now, Sam.
Okay, well, how will joining the EU be good for independent Scotland is a question. Well, if we join the EU as an independent country, Scotland will reclaim the benefits we enjoyed until we were forced to leave in 2020, when we were dragged out by the UK government's Brexit. So we'll have the benefit of the single market and the customs union, and that will open up the markets again to Scottish goods, particularly smoked salmon and other fish and farm produce and all of the food, the quality food that Scotland produces. And of course, all that Brexit red tape will disappear. So we'll have new opportunities for supply chains, businesses, increased trade and availability of workers. Workers and students will have Erasmus and a free movement across the EU countries, expanding employment and study opportunities for all our citizens. And EU citizens will once again feel welcome to come and make Scotland their home and contribute to our economy. We'll also have higher environmental standards, protecting nature and clean beaches and rivers. And you can see how already those environmental standards are being eroded because people like Rees-Mogg think we can just throw away all these high standards, and particularly workers' rights. He thinks it can now be a race to the bottom. So that workers' rights and women's rights and human rights are all better in the EU than they're going to be in Brexit Britain. So there's also a commitment to climate action in the EU via the EU Green Deal. And I think it's obvious that if we work together on an issue like that, we'll get the best results. And then, of course, if we travel to the EU, we'll get our medical cards back, where we can get reciprocal treatment, no roaming charges, no long queues, the customs and passport checks, and people will be able to once again retire to France and Spain and where there's nice warm countries. And there'll be a restoration of EU structural funds for deprived areas. The amount of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is going to be allocated to Scotland, will be probably 40% less than was received from the EU. So, and now when you think of what's going on today, the EU is first and foremost a peace project. And you can see how the EU is standing together against Putin. And there's Boris Johnson hanging on the coattails of Biden, up to his neck in Russian money. So on the next slide, some people have said EFTA could be a stepping stone to joining the EU. The European Free Trade Area consists of 4 non-EU states: Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. And some people see this as an option, particularly people in the Alba Party. However, EFTA is not. It doesn't have. It's not part of the EU's customs union. So if Scotland joined EFTA, Brexit trade barriers and red tape would continue for Scottish exporters. An EFTA state can get access to the single market if they join the European Economic Area as well. 3 of the 4 EFTA states are already members of that. However, this needs agreement of all 30 EEA members and a significant annual financial contribution. So although joining EFTA may be quicker than gaining EU membership, joining EEA as well as EFTA could take even more time. EFTA members would also doubt whether an application from Scotland was being made in good faith if we were regarding it simply as a stepping stone to a bigger trading bloc. And although EFTA and EEA have formal relationships with the EU, they are not part of it. If Scotland were an EFTA EEA state, we'd have no elected representatives in the European Parliament, in other words, MEPs. We couldn't appoint EU commissioners. We'd have no say in new EU trade and foreign security laws and trade deals. As an EFTA state, we would be making large regular payments, but would not have representation or influence within the EU. We'd have no seat at the table with the EU 27 and never be able to hold the presidency of the Council of the European Union. EFTA might seem by some people as an acceptable compromise, but it's the second best. So why should we accept second best? We want to be a rule maker, not a rule taker. So in contrast, EU membership will mean full representation and voting rights in the EU Parliament, ability to appoint EU commissioners. That means a seat at the table of EU's policymakers. And once independent Scotland could immediately apply to join the EU, once Scotland is independent, we could immediately apply to join the EU. And although accession can take a number of years, as a candidate country, we could obtain temporary association agreement, which the EU would allow us to reclaim most of our rights and privileges and access to the single market and customs union. So that could be done during the transition period when the new Scottish government is negotiating the withdrawal agreement from England and Wales. So that would be our stepping stone. So to sum up, EFTA and EU membership would be very much second best, and there's no good argument for taking that path when we know that we could get this associate agreement. Okay. So where are we up to?
Sorry, I was muted. Does anybody want to ask any questions just now, or should we just bash on? What do you think, Sharon?
Why don't you keep going, and then we'll, if you can remember your questions, we'll have Q&A at the end then.
Okay, cheers. Okay, so the next point that is often made about the EU is that the EU won't let Scotland in, that we'll be at the back of the queue, that some countries might veto our membership. Well, actually, those might have been, arguments. Those are arguments from some time ago. We know a lot more now about the attitudes of European countries to Scotland as a possible candidate. And part of that is that, well, they all know that we have been an EU member as part of the UK, but we have been an EU member for 5 decades, I think it is, isn't it? We are very, very accustomed to being partners within the EU. We know how it works. We would readily meet the accession criteria, which are also known as the Copenhagen acquis. There are political criteria to do with stability of institutions, guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, respect for protection of minorities. There are economic criteria. We have to have a functioning market economy, capacity to cope with competition and market forces. We have to have administrative and institutional capacity to implement the acquis and the ability to take on the obligations of membership. All of this we are very familiar with. All of this we have fully complied with for a long time already. And if you want more on that, there's a good bit on our website for more information and other sources. As Sam was mentioning, we would be able to set up an association agreement quite quickly once we're independent. There isn't a queue. At any one time, there are several candidate countries, but they're not dealt with in sequence in terms of, when they put in their applications. They're dealt with in parallel. And some that are maybe struggling to meet the criteria, they will take longer than others. But we're not going to struggle with that. And it has been suggested that it would actually be quite a fast process, as long as we haven't been out of the EU for so long that our laws have diverged, as Rees-Mogg wants to do, for example. There's been plenty of expressions of support by European countries, EU countries, for Scotland, and you might be familiar with this organisation, Europe for Scotland. So what this is a network of lots of high-profile people across Europe, politicians, cultural figures, intellectuals, and they have, via Scotland for Europe, they signed a letter last year, an open letter to the EU, basically telling the EU that they should be supporting an application from independent Scotland when that comes, and making the case, helping us make the case for Scotland. So there's plenty of support. Now on this slide, I've got links to videos, but I tried them earlier and they didn't actually work. So I might just leave those for the moment. But if you're on social media, you can see, if you go to Europe for Scotland on Twitter, especially, they might be on Facebook as well, I'm not sure, but certainly on Twitter, if you have a look at Europe for Scotland, they've released several videos, which are all excellent. And I'll just show you, this is a couple of slides from a presentation they did, and you can see that amongst their advisors, they have Leslie Ridder, and also in terms of the letter, the open letter that they signed from lots of people. I think it was high profile people and 13,500, I think, citizens across Europe, including from Scotland and the UK. And these are some of the people. There's Val McDermid, there's Brian Cox, and so on, some other high-profile Scottish folk in there. And I think the final point about would they let us in, I think maybe the final point is that Scotland, as a country, as a nation, we have values and principles that are very much in line with those of the EU itself, valuing human rights, valuing democracy, and so on, and this is well known, and people do know about us in Europe. When we were campaigning around the election last year, we were down at Holyrood quite a lot. We often spoke to European media, okay? British media took very little interest in us, but European media from France, Germany, Italy, they were very keen to talk to us and find out about our position on independence, and in particular, of course, our position on whether we were aiming to join the EU. So we are not alone, I think is the message there. Okay, so coming down to the nitty-gritty now, Sam, do you want to continue with this, this lovely question?
Okay, well, lots of people say, oh, what about Scotland's massive deficit? When a country applies to join the EU, it becomes a candidate country, and transition to full accession takes place over a period of time. If a country has a high deficit, and many candidate countries do, it's expected to demonstrate that they're putting economic measures in place to bring down their deficit. And of course, Scotland has what is going to be a fantastic renewable industry. And so prosperity will be, will be there to bring down any deficit that we might have. And the rules are quite flexible. And we've got a wealth of natural resources. And of course, the deficit is usually exaggerated because it's dependent on UK spending as a whole. And lots of things that we don't vote for or maybe don't want, like nuclear power stations and HS2, are put in that account. And that artificially raises it up. The next slide is about whether there'll be a border. People are concerned about whether there'll be a hard border with England. Okay. And will there be checks on goods? There was a recent very good seminar by Hayward and McEwen for UK in a Changing Europe, where they've written a report on the possibility of a border and what it would mean for Scotland and England. And there's nothing especially radical about an independent nation state assuming responsibility for managing its own borders. Effective management of the border will be supported considerably by cooperation between authorities on either side of it. In other words, how hard or soft the border is will depend on the outcome of negotiations. According to the World Trade Organization, all independent nations must have clearly defined and policed borders to regulate trade and reduce smuggling. Independent Scotland will have a land border with England and sea borders with all other countries of the world. The level of checks on goods that will take place on the Scotland-England border will depend on the outcome of negotiations, as I've said, and that's between the Scottish and Westminster governments. Free movement of people and goods between Scotland and neighbouring European countries will resume when Scotland joins the EU. But will there be will we need passports when we go to England? Well, the answer is probably not, because we will still be in the common travel area. And that means that we can still travel to England, Ireland, Northern Ireland or Wales, and we'll be able to travel freely without passports. And that's, again, open to negotiation, but Ireland is independent and still is part of the common travel area. So there's no reason why Scotland shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about what about trade? Because there is this concern that Scottish trade will suffer, because at the moment about 60% of Scottish exports go to the rest of the UK. So what will happen about that, you know, once we're independent anyway? And you know, 3 times more than that used to go to the EU, but now, you know, because of Brexit, that of course has reduced tremendously, as we know. So it's you can't get away from it, actually, that you know, once we are independent and on the way to joining the EU, trade is going to be constrained in various ways. You know, there will be a border, as Sam was just saying, but we have to look to the long term here, because EU, maybe not such a long term, EU membership will of course open up the new opportunities for trade. Well, certainly restore them, and we can maybe, you know, increase them as well. And we will therefore reduce our dependence on trade with the rest of the UK. And don't forget that if the Northern Ireland Protocol holds, there will be free trade, and that's a big if, actually, isn't it? But assuming that's the case, then free trade with Northern Ireland will continue anyway, you know, seamlessly throughout. Another example to look at maybe is the case of Ireland, that is the Republic of Ireland, which became independent in 1922. And there was a big concern then, because over 95% of its exports went to the UK. But after becoming independent, after joining the EU itself, Ireland, the proportion of its trade going to the UK had dropped to 9%. You know, much lower. And meanwhile, Ireland, as we know, has become you know, much more prosperous and a much more peaceful country, and we hope that continues. But you know, obviously there's a massive threat there from Brexit and the Tories and Johnson government. Okay, so yes, there are concerns. However, the other thing that often comes up is about currency, and people are concerned that we would be forced to adopt the euro if we're applying to join the EU. That is actually a myth. That we wouldn't be forced to join the euro at all. There are several countries in the EU who don't use the euro. When the UK was a member, we didn't use the euro. There will be certain options to consider, and actually this is a topic that has been written about and talked about an awful lot, so I'm sure you're familiar with the various other sources of information on possible currency options. Again, this is something that will need to be discussed, it will need to be negotiated, and things change. You know, the financial environment changes all the time. So the euro was actually regarded as a rather weak currency, but that's no longer the case. She says firmly, but I believe that I'm not an expert, but I believe that's the case. Another argument that's often been put forward is that the EU is bureaucratic, it's undemocratic, and why should we tie ourselves to their laws? This is something that we've often heard when we're talking to people out on the street. So I think in terms of bureaucracy, well, we can see now, you know, exactly how much bureaucracy is involved when you're not in the EU. So I'm hoping that that has put that one to rest. I mean, the other thing is that they don't have a massive equivalent of the civil service. Administration is like that of a UK city, for example. It's been compared to the council of the city of Birmingham. So, you know, I think that's quite reasonable actually for an association of 27, as well as 28 countries. As far as being undemocratic, well, when we campaigned in the European elections, which was the last European elections, which was a while ago now, but we found an awful lot of people didn't even know that they were represented. They didn't know that they were represented by MEPs in the European Parliament. So I think that criticism about undemocratic is not well based on fact. We have the MEPs elected to the Parliament. We'd have representatives on the European Commission, European Court of Justice, and other key EU institutions. So the democratic process is improving continuously. I mean, the other argument about this is if you're not happy with the level of democracy in an institution, then you do your best to improve things, preferably from the inside. You can't do anything from the outside. So once we remember, hopefully we would want to contribute to further improvements in that direction. And another aspect of it is that some people say we can help strengthen the role of the smaller states. I mean, one of our arguments is that the smaller states within the EU are actually well respected and they feel supported. Look at the support they gave Ireland not that long ago. And the small states, we know that they do feel respected. And Scotland, as another small state, a strong small state, would actually help strengthen the role of the smaller states in the EU. Okay, as far as being undemocratic, you know, that's kind of that's a bit rich, you know, coming from the UK, where we have the House of Lords unelected, massive House of Lords unelected, and the first past the post elections, which don't guarantee representation at all, really. Okay, as far as being tied to their laws, what's often not realised is that actually it was the UK which drafted much of the legislation, which was then passed into law by the European Parliament and of course readily adopted by the UK, often because we had helped draft it in the first place. The UK has always been very well respected for skills in this area in terms of legislation. And you know, efficiency of institutions and so on. Okay, so that's, I think, hopefully that lays to rest some of those concerns. So Sam's going to talk about another issue now.
Yeah, well, some people have started saying, oh, well, should we have another EU referendum once we're independent? Is there a mandate? Well, I think I would argue that very definitely there is a mandate. The underlying question is whether Scottish people have had the opportunity to express their wishes, and the answer is obviously yes, more than once. In the 2016 UK Brexit referendum, Scots voted by 62% to 38% to remain in the EU, and last year SNP and Green MSPs won their seats, making up a pro-Indy, pro-EU majority in Holyrood on their manifestos, in which they both committed to independence and full EU membership. ALBA is the only political party advocating independence plus the membership of EFTA. However, they received just 1.7% share of the vote in 2021. So the wishes of Scots have already been clearly democratically expressed. It will therefore be legitimate, following a yes vote in IndyRef 2, for the Scottish Government to immediately embark on accession negotiations with the EU. Once a detailed accession agreement has been reached, there may be a case for holding a confirmatory referendum, and that is asking for approval or otherwise of the deal that's been negotiated. Some countries have done so and may feel that this is unnecessary for Scotland, as there's already a strong mandate for EU membership. But I guess that will be up to the political parties involved at the time. and how they think the strength of the public feeling is. Okay, so the Believing Scotland.
Sorry, this is from a recent survey by Believing Scotland, which you may have seen yourselves. And they found that 88% of a sample of almost 6,000 indie supporters support policy of EU membership. So this tells us that, you know, it is important to take into account the views of, obviously, indie supporters, because we want their votes, we want their yes votes. They have also, Believing Scotland have also found that a high proportion of voters who have switched from no to yes have been persuaded to do that because of the increasing commitment to EU membership. So there is a view that in order to make sure you get this, which is quite a large body of voters in the Scottish population, in order to make sure that you secure their vote, because you know they're very keen on EU membership, it's really important to stress that commitment to EU membership. Now we have that in the Scottish Government, as Sam was saying, you know, as a result of the cooperation agreement between the SNP and the Greens, both highly committed to those two aims. So as I say, there is this argument that we need to emphasise this as a way of convincing people to vote yes in the first place. So that's worth taking on board. We've nearly finished now. Thanks for your patience. I don't know if you can see the top of the screen. I've put that to near the top of the slide, I think. But anyway, it says, achieving Indie and joining the EU will be complicated. How long will it take? And I've put there a possible timeline. I haven't put any actual times on it. I've just put the steps, but I'll just say a little bit about that. The thing is that it is, you know, it's quite complicated, and we have to be in it for the long haul. But it's not impossible, it's not insurmountable, that's the thing. It's not going to be easy, and I think as a movement, as a yes movement, we do have to acknowledge the difficulties, because these difficulties are thrown at us all the time. You know, the kind of issues that we've talked about. People say, oh well, they won't let you in, you have to drop the euro, the trade will drop, and so on and so on. And I think when people put those questions to us, they think we're going to say, oh, all right then, it's going to be a bit hard, we'll not bother. It's not like that, is it? We know it's going to be hard work, but we're going to take it on. In any case, you know, something that's often overlooked is it's not that unusual. It's not exceptional for a small country to want to be self-determining. And in recent history, you've got countries that have become independent from the former Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR. You've got countries that were, you know, there was the former Yugoslavia, the former Czechoslovakia, and so on. And, you know, so loads of small countries have joined since the 1990s. They've become independent and they've joined the EU. So it's, you know, okay, it's been hard work for them, but not impossible. And of course, Leslie Riddoch has done quite a lot of work on those processes, or some of those countries. So what about Scotland then? What's the possible timeline? Well, very, very roughly, you know, the estimates vary, and people say maybe between 5 and 10 years. 5 is obviously very optimistic. 10 years, well, I hope I'm still alive. These are, well, you know, like a lot of us, you have to be realistic. So here are the steps. First of all, we need the yes result in the referendum, obviously. And then there'll be a transition period, and during that time there'll be we negotiate with the withdrawal agreement from the UK and this association agreement with the EU, which is like a preliminary thing before applying to join. And those can go on at the same time concurrently, and also things like border arrangements that will have to be established, and new ferry routes, hopefully, with the EU, which we really need right now, actually. Then after that transition period, we get, you know, we reach independence, we get Independence Day. Now that transition period could be 2 years, could be 3, but anyway. Once we got Independence Day, the EU accession process continues. We get an accession treaty agreed, details published, possible referendum or not. Sam talked about the pros and cons of that a moment ago. Possibly a referendum to approve the treaty, and we get yes approval of that as well. And then Scotland is a full member of the independent Scotland. Sorry, I should have put that on the slide. Independent Scotland is a full EU member. So those are the steps, and from Independence Day to Scotland being a full EU member could be 5 years, could be maybe a bit more. Kirsty Hughes, who writes a lot about this, reckons maybe 2030. I hope it's no later than that, quite honestly. So I think that's about it, actually. We've just put some links in there. And these are just the ones that occurred to us. As you know, there's loads and loads of material available online. And we've included on there Kirsty Hughes, I've just mentioned, Stephen Gethins, he's great on Scotland in Europe and the world. Anthony Salmoni, very good on the EU accession, and so on. So I think that's it. Sorry, I think we've overrun our time. So sorry for rambling on a bit, but I hope that was useful. Yeah.